Hi, I'm Franco Luna Puma Podcast. You're listening to Teka Teka News, balitang thinking, hindi breaking. In this episode,
I do not get it why they insist on entering the Philippines in spite of the fact that we are no longer members, and that the principle here, if ever we are members, is the issue of complementarity. And complementary means that there's no overlapping jurisdiction. It's either us or them. Do they want to boot out our country and take over our legal system?
we look at how the International Criminal Court can still investigate former President Duterte's drug war, even without the government's cooperation.
Definitely, I do not welcome this move of theirs, and I will not welcome them to the Philippines unless they make clear that they will respect us in this regard.
That was Justice Secretary Boying Remulla. He was reacting to news that the International Criminal Court had approved an investigation into crimes against humanity during the Duterte administration's war on drugs. ICC judges decided the Philippine government couldn't prove it was doing enough to investigate and prosecute the killings. They thought local investigations didn't produce quote-unquote tangible, concrete, and progressive results. But Secretary Remulla is putting up a fight.
They will have no compulsory process in the country. They will not even be empowered to issue subpoenas in the country. They have not even coordinated with us about it. So if they want to come in, as a hostile force, come in. But they cannot do that to us.
Himayin muna natin. The government's main talking point for months now has been that the Philippines already left the ICC in 2019. Which is true. President Duterte withdrew the country in anger. But the Rome Statute, which created the ICC, actually retains jurisdiction over the time period that we were members. Meaning, yes, they can investigate us up until 2019. Even our Supreme Court ruled that the government is still obliged to cooperate with the ICC even after leaving it. But how can they do a proper investigation if Malacanang refuses to cooperate? Here's Carlos Conde. He is senior Philippines researcher at the New York-based Human Rights Watch.
The ICC really relies on cooperation of state parties or even non-state parties to the Rome Statute. Part of the statute that the Philippines signed on in 2011 was that a continued cooperation with the ICC even after they got out of the Rome Statute. Now, the ICC itself has said, one, they don't have police powers in the Philippines. So I don't think they can easily, come in, or it's even inconceivable that they would come in here clandestinely to conduct an investigation. They have to go through the Philippine government in all the processes to do that.
Ibig sabihin, oo, tama nga si Remulla. Investigators won't have subpoena powers or any kind of compulsory processes. But that doesn't mean they don't have options for gathering evidence. Let's hear now from Dr. Aurora Parong. She's chair of Amnesty International Philippines and co-chairperson of the Philippine Coalition for the International Criminal Court.
It's more difficult if the Philippine government will not cooperate. However, as of now, at this stage investigation, there are ways by which the ICC is getting information because some families of victims have been sending communications to them. And yun na yung pinanggagalingan ng basis nila why the investigation should happen. Because they see that there's systematic and widespread crimes of humanity in the form of murder.
In short, it may take longer, but there are ways around it. Investigators can conduct Zoom interviews, or they could even fly witnesses out of the Philippines to speak to them. Here's Carlos Conde of Human Rights Watch again.
There are two things that the ICC can do after the investigation stage. One is that it can issue a summons to identified people. That is not a warrant. That's just basically a notification to the one being accused that they're being summoned to The Hague to face the charges. Now, the summons is not, as I would say, sinister sounding as a warrant of arrest, right? So the calculation being that If, for instance, President Duterte is issued a summons, it becomes more palatable for him because he's not under arrest, he's just being summoned, and he's probably even more likely to accept the summons. Now, if the summons is rejected, then that's the time the ICC can ramp it up to turn in a warrant of arrest for whoever.
We're pausing for a quick break now. When we return, we'll tell you about the likely scenarios for the International Criminal Court.
Teka, before we continue, singit lang ako. Hi, I'm Trisha Aquino, Chief Content Officer at Puma Podcast and producer of our show Conservative Ako with sex and relationships therapist, Doc Rica Cruz. It's the month of love. How are you celebrating? Is it by learning to love your partner more?
Ipakita mo sa kanya kung saan ka ba nasasarapan, kung ano ba yung mga pwede niyang gawin sa'yo. You take the lead. Kahit na nakakahiya, gawin mo yun para sa sarili mo.
Or focusing on loving yourself?
Napakalaga para sa ating lahat to know how we relate sa katawan natin. Anong klaseng respeto ang kailangan ng katawan? Anong klaseng pagtanggap sa mga ninanais nito at sa kasayahan nito ang dapat?
Doc Rica Cruz and her guest experts are here to improve your relationships, whether it be with your lover or with yourself. Listen to Season 3 of Conservative Ako, our podcast on sex and female pleasure, wherever you get your podcasts.
We need to reaffirm the wisdom of the founders of our United Nations. This means transcending our differences and committing to ending war, upholding justice, respecting human rights, and maintaining international peace and security.
That's President Bongbong Marcos at the UN General Assembly last year. He's already said he wants to continue Duterte's drug war, but with a more health-centric approach. They talked this up in their diplomatic visits around the world. But what kind of message does it send to foreign partners that his administration won't cooperate with ICC investigations? And how would member states of the ICC respond to our hostility towards the global court? At least 123 countries around the world are state parties to the Rome Statute. 19 of them are in Asia Pacific. Advocates say continued pushback from the Philippine government would cast doubt on Marcos' promise to uphold human rights.
The case will not proceed if there will be no one arrested at least to undergo the trial. Isang scenario. And then, yun nga, lalo na kung negative actions ang gagawin nila, paano kaya yung isang possible tingin na ng UN sa kanya? Kasi as of now, we're trying to maintain a good position at the United Nations by accepting the United Nations joint program with the Philippines. At yan yung sinasabi ng gusto nila.
Even senior Canadian government officials who requested anonymity have called on the Philippine government to cooperate with ICC investigators. But it's not clear how much international pressure can help. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance, it took nearly 2 years to get the first arrest warrant. But in Georgia, it took almost 6 years. So while the investigation can still continue, Remulla's stance can also ultimately affect the trial later on. Aurora Parong of Amnesty International says the pushback could even delay a trial indefinitely. And that's a problem given Duterte's age.
Kasi trial, you are there eh. The one who's charged has to be there. Right then kasi in any judicial system na accused to be able to defend himself or herself or to be there so that they will know what exactly is happening again and what are the evidences being given to them. They will also in fact be given lawyers by the ICC itself.
Secretary Remulla says the government is still open to a dialogue with the ICC.
No, I'm saying that we can dialogue with them. If they want data from us, we will provide them the data. That's okay with us. But to impose themselves on us, that is totally unacceptable.
But it's also worrisome when he says they could treat the ICC as a quote-unquote hostile force. That could have serious legal implications for witnesses and other sources. Also, does this mean Duterte could get arrested? Let me bring in attorney Cristina Conti. She represents victims of the drug war as an accredited assistant to counsel before the International Criminal Court.
Depende, no? Of course, hindi pwedeng pumunta yung pulis ng ibang bansa dito tapos manghuli, di ba? Kasi that's our jurisdiction. Pero I'm imagining na what if he goes out of the country, tapos dun siya hulihin, mahirapan naman din siyang magkaso kasi magkakaso siya dun sa country. Hindi, kumbaga, territoriality. But I think that an injunction or an action to stop, to prohibit his arrest has already been used in other cases. Pwedeng effective, pwedeng hindi. Pero yun nga, depende dun sa factors. Where is he being arrested? Or was he arrested kung sakali? Where he is at, literally. And sino itong arresting force? Anong nationality? Sa totoo, ang nararamdaman ko sa kanila, para silang hinahabol ng sarili nilang multo.
Now, one last thing. I should point out that the ICC also doesn't have a police force. It will have to rely on its other member states to help enforce a warrant. So how will this all end? Here's Carlos Conde of Human Rights Watch again.
I imagine that Mr. Marcos is under tremendous pressure because of the fact that his allies, the Dutertes, are still in power. Given the status quo, I don't think there will be a change in attitude toward the ICC in the near term. So that can only mean that this is going to be a long, drawn-out process. This investigation might even outlive the Marcos administration. In 2028, if Marcos is no longer president and the political winds change, probably they would be in a better position to conduct an investigation or to continue the process. Or if the next president suddenly becomes even worse than this present government in terms of being transparent and open, then we will continue to have a problem.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Joe Salcedo and produced by Kat Ventura. If you liked this episode, share it with a friend or two. And of course, don't forget to follow Teka Teka News and Puma Podcast on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Thanks for listening.